This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke and Ewen McKenzie. It is a weekend of rugby like no other in terms of the amount of games that are being played, mainly in Europe. And I am going to go through the full list at some point through today because there are games going on everywhere. But for mine, I can't take my eyes off France, South Africa in Paris. Who wins it? And why?
Well, I've looked at the teams. France, traditionally difficult to beat at home, but not impossible. I'm not sure that the people will tell me I'm wrong, but I'm not sure they've been better at other grounds than maybe in Paris. But I'm talking about France. But South Africa looks, there's no real surprises. South Africa's really found a new team dynamic. They've got the traditional forward player. Now they've got some X factor in the back. So they look pretty settled. We've watched them a lot. So they've played some good football in the last series of outings. France went to New Zealand with, their B team minus some key players and whatever, but they keep developing talent. And while I look at their team list and I see a few names that I'm used to seeing and not there, I've got no doubt that the players that are there are going to play with the same verve and, esprit that you'd expect from a French team. So the question is whether they can do that against a pretty gnarly, experienced South African team, whether that's going to be enough. They'll certainly have a crack, and they play, as we've discussed before, they love playing in front of their home crowd. It's important to play well in front of your family and friends. So, there's a bit in that game. I'll probably get down to the referee, who I haven't looked at to see who's doing that game.
Angus Gardner.
Okay, well, that'll be interesting. Probably need to know who the TMO is because he'll be. Last time I saw him referee, he was taking advice from everyone, not the crowd, but luckily the crowd speaks French, so that might absolve the crowd from having input. But he was asking everyone last time we watched him refereeing. The TMO was busy. So let's hope it's not defined by the refereeing group. Let's hope it's defined by some pretty exciting football, which potentially has got a reasonable scoreline in this game, I think. It could be a good sort of 30-point aside type game. I'll probably edge with South Africa, I think, just the fact that they've been playing a bit more recently.
How difficult is it in those early matches when you are bringing a team together, such as the French? Obviously, South Africa have had the advantage of the Rugby Championship, the series against Italy, the match last week against Japan. So they've played a lot of football, and as you say, we've seen them improve over time, and they only look more cohesive and effective as time goes on. But from a French perspective, when you're coming together, when you're bringing teams together in those early weeks of a preparation as they get ready clearly for their season, how hard is it, and what are the things that you're focused on the most?
It is difficult, if it's a newish team. They've got some change. They've got a few key players missing. Entomac's back, so he's a bit of a crutch for them. So that's good. The forwards, they seem to be able to mix up and still get an outcome. So I think that there'll be a clarity around how they play, because I think that Galtier has been there long enough now that any new faces will be familiar with what's required. And so I think that they won't have had a long preparation, but they'll certainly have the opportunity to fine tune the emotional input, and that it's a matter of balancing that with being clinical. And that's probably always been the big games that get a bit too emotional. It's a matter of and I think Galtier has done a really good job with the French team over the last few years about managing that dynamic. And so if they can get out there with that sort of cool, cold precision, along with the sort of instinctive flair, they'll be hard to handle at times. I think they'll compete pretty well at set piece. But I think South Africa will still go hard at them at scrum time, and they've lost Ox, but other than that, they've sort of been able to pick all the players they want. They've still got their good kick chase game, high ball chasing, plus the X factor at 10 with Sasha. There's a bit going on for South Africa. So I think the French won't be overawed by it because of the fact that they're playing at home, and that's emotionally important to them. I just think that they'll need to have that sort of ruthless, steely focus and make sure they don't get on the wrong side of the referee. And that's, as I've said every week now, a yellow card makes a difference in these games. So hopefully discipline is good on both sides.
So you talk about that emotional aspect of it, and it was interesting to see the comment of Maxime Lucu this week talking about how in the quarterfinal of the Rugby World Cup in France in 2023, they lost by a point, 28 points to 29. He described it this week as they stole our World Cup. And when Ntamack was asked similarly about that loss, he talked about a gloom sort of going across not just the people who were in the team or the squad, but it was much broader than that and had quite an impact on the French rugby psyche. So with that, does that sort of suggest to you that this game carries more, or they're still dealing with something that happened, a couple of years ago?
Well, Rassi was talking about, the Springboks losing to Japan when they played Japan last week. So that's stuck in there. That's stuck in their craw. So you don't tend to forget the losses that the monumental losses, and that was a World Cup that that was obviously one of the ones they thought they were going to win, and the home team always has a bit of an advantage, or feels like it should have an advantage. So they feel like they let that one away, and it gets down to there are moments in the game, and in every game where you got to say, was that a critical moment? You just you want to be on the right side of the critical moments, and you don't want to be having. You don't want to lose your cool, and we can see how close. It's such a precise game now, how close it can be. That that shoulder position in tackling and in cleaning out can have a catastrophic effect on the outcome and on the scoreboard if you end up in the bin. So you have to be clinical enough to be able to put your body in the right places at the right time consistently and it is a contest of speed. The speed to the breakdown is critical. So the speed of getting in there and sealing off and whatever, that has to be a very precise thing. It's not just a blustery, blah, and we get in there and sort of smash everything. There might have been that way 30 years ago, but not anymore. So you have to be very precise. And I think Galteo has done a very good job in adding that precision to their game. The flair is there instinctively, and I think he picks players that have got that inherent characteristic, but it's the precision that goes with it that will define this game, I think. And the same for South Africa to some extent. They've got to be precise too. So otherwise we don't want the refereeing community to be managing the outcomes.
But you would think that, the Springboks, very experienced side that Rassi has selected, I think there's something in the order of about 800 caps. You'd be surprised if they were overwhelmed or surprised by anything that would happen either in the week leading up to the match or dealing, in fact, with the crowd at Stade de France, because in your opinion, is there anything particularly unique about playing at Stade de France, or is it just, a very big stadium with a lot of energy in it?
Yeah, it's a big stadium, and I've coached a few games there with Australia and obviously with Stade Francais. So, and they're big occasions. You've got the track around the outside, so it sort of pushes the crowd away a little bit from the traditional rectangle. So it's got an open back to the roof, so you sort of there's noise, but it's not inescapable. It's not as difficult as some of those South African stadiums where they're right on top of you, looking down. It feels like you're looking they're standing on your shoulder, looking at you and yelling in your ear. It's a bit like that. They're so close. So in that sense, it's not as intimidating, but it does create different challenges for the players on the field. I think they've been there and done that, the South Africa. I don't think that's the problem. I think for South Africa, it's about whether France can generate some tactics that put them under pressure. And that's the interesting part for me, and whether France has had time to be able to do that, to embed something. But they've always got some flair, and they will take opportunities that come along. You don't need much. They've got a bit of X factor around, just like South Africa does. So that works both ways. It'll be probably a question. I think South Africa will kick and chase a bit, test France out that way. I'll be interested to see what France does. If what do they do with their first phase possession? If they're winning their scrums and lineouts, how they're playing it? Are they going to be looking to move the South Africans around, or are they going to be looking to see if they can compete over the top of the South African wingers, for instance? So there's a bit of an unknown there for me.
What would you
in phase play? In phase play, I think that they'll, the flair will be there and the opportunities will be there if they can take it. It's just a matter of being patient.
What would you do if you were Galtier? What would you?
If I were Galtier, I'd be trying to move the game around a little bit, and I always say up tempo, but I think if I was playing an older side that's experienced, that wants to play point to point, set piece, wants to dominate set pieces, I'd be looking for ways to speed up the lineouts, quick lineouts. We saw Australia did a really good job of that when Skelton came into the side. Using the front of the line against the British Lions, front of the line out, back of the line, little runs around things like that, just to break the game up and break up the tempo. It doesn't allow South Africa time to defend, and then you mix it up with some driving play and whatever. So you've got to keep South Africa on its toes. You just don't present them a meat and three veg type game plan where they can get stuck in. You've got to be a little bit more sophisticated than that, and I think they've got the capability of that. So it's just a question of what they've been able to put into the preparation.
Anyway, something to look forward to, and I'm with you. I think the Springboks, having had the advantage of playing together for so many weeks now, I think that'll be just a bit too much for the French on this occasion. Surprised not to see Gregory Aldred there, but as you say, clearly the player who has taken his spot has done so on form, and that will be certainly a match to look forward to. And one hopes that we get one of those classic matches between France and the Springboks. But another,
we want some flow in the game. We don't want to stop-start. We don't want All Blacks Ireland Mark II. We don't want that again. So.
No. Well, and that's the next match we can have a chat about. All Blacks Scotland. Certainly, disappointing last week, I think, always round, but New Zealand got there in the end. Satiti coming on at the end played well. McKenzie coming on played well. We've already spoken about Roygaard and the contribution that he's made. Satiti comes into the side and they play the 100th year anniversary of rugby at Murrayfield. New Zealand have never lost at Murrayfield against Scotland. Is this the weekend?
Tell me that. I haven't seen the New Zealand team. I've seen the Scotland team. So what's the New Zealand team? Do you have it in front of you?
I don't have it in front of me, but just from memory, Barrett's out and Josh Lord is in. Two Barretts are out. Geordie Barrett's out and Lester Fianuku is in the centre with Quinn Tapau.
So that's a good. I think that's interesting because he's got a bit of. Barrett at 12's been a mainstay for them, but the guy coming, he's got some punch. He's got some line break ability. So there'll be something different there, which is probably not a bad thing. Everyone that's watched the videotapes, you're going to get a different presentation from him. The Lord in the second row. That's a good second row. That'll be good in terms of being able to compete in that space. So, we've talked about Barrett, the captain Barrett, during the season about where he was as a second row and whatever. So I'm interested to see what the options are. So we'll see. Satiti coming back in in the back row. he's good. So he was given the first start, and then they started leaving him out, and now they're putting him back in. So maybe it's a reward for form last week, but that's how you want to do it. If your bench players are doing well, you give them a bit of a look, and so that's a good thing. I mean, it's a funny competition because you got Scotland coming off a massive win over the USA, and then it's quite possible they might end up on the wrong side of the scoreline against the All Blacks. It's hard to know. I mean, Scotland have picked pretty much what you'd expect. A couple of surprises. Left Vandenberg on the wing, which is a surprise because he's been a bit of a talisman for them and a bit of a try-scoring freak in some regards. But I watched him. They focused on him in the Six Nations special on Netflix, and I watched him, and he's clearly got he's fairly emotionally connected to the game. So therefore, it seemed to me like he can get a bit depressed if his performances aren't there. So I don't know why they didn't pick him, but maybe he's a bit down on his luck at the moment. I don't know. So it seems like a strange non-selection because he's been very effective for them in key games. So maybe there's more ones, I don't know. But the rest of it is what you'd expect. So they've got quite a few Lions players there in the backs in particular. So don't know. I'm really interested to see how this game goes. But I think New Zealand will get there, and it could be by 15 or 20.
Yeah, well, what about this Murrayfield fortress for New Zealand that they've played there? I'm not sure how many times it is that they've played there, but it's they've been playing there for a long time and they've never lost. That surely has to be somewhere in Scotland's mind. That
I don't think it. Yeah, that's true, but there's been a lot of other records that have been broken. This year we saw that with Australia and Ellis Park. So those sort of things get broken eventually. We saw that with Ireland. Ireland couldn't beat New Zealand, and now they're sort of 50-50 in recent times. So the things change. So Scotland just want to beat them because they're ahead of them in the rankings. They're by reputation, much revered and powerful, and the history of the All Blacks is unmatched in a way. So they'll just want to beat them for that reason, and hopefully, and getting a first win at Murrayfield will that'll be nice. The fans would certainly like that, but it's it'll be a tough game, I think. But I think New Zealand will probably outlast them. The same X factor guys, Roy Gard, whatever. Yeah. These guys will make a difference in the end. Yeah,
McKenzie's on the bench once again, so again likely to make a strong contribution when he does come onto the field. But in your coaching career, did you? Because Scotland are a team. Clearly, Gregor Townsend is a very good coach, and as you say, they have a number of good players, experienced players. Lions now coming into their own. They've promised a lot for quite some time, but never been able to quite deliver either in the very big matches to go on to win Six Nations titles or to be able to push up into quarterfinals and semi-finals in Rugby World Cups. When you're coaching a team, or have you coached a team like that, where the talent's clearly there, the skills and physical preparation is clearly there, but you're not quite getting there. And how is it that you manage with that, with that confidence when they haven't been able to win the close games, the big close games, not just the games that they're expected to win?
Well, there's the inoculation process, which I talk about. Where you just got to get out there and put yourself up against the teams that thwart you or are always difficult to beat. You got to put yourself up against that, and try and play them as often as you can. That's in theory, and if you can't do it at the test level, then obviously whatever level you can do it so that the players aren't overawed by the thought of playing against guys. It's always the guy you play the first time that's the most difficult, especially if you don't know who it is. You've never heard of them. They're always the hardest guys to play against. But if you play them 3 times in a row, you remember your memory. You sort of mentally lock away things. I'm talking about when in scrum battles and things like that. You remember things, and you take that into the next game. So you build your confidence against your direct opponent, but also, and the same applies in a team sense, you've got to keep exploring your tactical ability. If you take Australia at the moment, a lot of the conversation's been around, if we're talking about the fan-based competition, is always around, the game management, who's at 10, 9, 10 combination, who's controlling the game. When you coach teams, you've got what you've either recruited or what's available, or what, depending on injuries and things like that. So you've got to then match your game plan to the skill sets of what you've got. You can't have an expectation of playing beyond that if they haven't got the capacity to do that. So then you've got to tailor it. And there's been good examples of that, of tailoring your tactics around the capabilities of the players. So you've got to then, but at the same token, you can't underplay everything either. You've got to try and, if you've got players with some X factor, you've got to be able to give them the ball, give them the space, make space for them, give them an opportunity to get them one-on-one with their opponent. So there's a lot in that you can do. You can't be idle in that space. We just go out there and, as I say, the meat and three veg approach, you've got to try and keep trying to jazz it up a bit and try to do something different, because if you do more of the same, you're going to get more of the same. Mentally, if you take Ireland, just a classic example, Ireland against and Wales against New Zealand, they got over that, they conquered that, and now they're 50-50 in recent years. So they hadn't beat them once, and suddenly they start beating them, and that's probably the best example I can say, where you got to get your program to deliver, and then you get that first win, and it becomes a bit easier after that.
Well, I think for rugby's sake, it would be great if Scotland could get there. I think that would be, just a great occasion and probably good reward for a lot of the hard work that Scotland have put together over the last few years. But I think this is the best looking All Black team that we've seen this year. I think Tapea and Whainuku in the centres, I think that is possibly their strongest centre pairing. And I like the look of the back row with Satiti back, with Lakai and Surveyor. Roygaard clearly there, McKenzie coming off the bench. So anyway, I would say maybe New Zealand because it is their best team that they've selected this year. But who knows? And let's hope Scotland can put up a great performance. And let's hope again that it is a very entertaining match refereed by the very own Australian Nick Berry. He gets this opportunity. So I like Nick Berry. I think he's a good ref. I think he does a good job. I think he communicates very clearly. And let's hope, that the weather's not too sort of gloomy there in Scotland, and there's plenty of dry space about for the guys to be able to play. Ireland takes on Japan. They've made 8 changes to the team that went down 26 points to 13 against the All Blacks. Probably the key, no Jemison Gibson-Park, and Crowley has retained his position ahead of Prendergast. Ty Byrne survived the red card, which was rescinded. Bizarre sort of a week there. And Doris back into the team as well. So what do you think? We were hoping to talk to Eddie Jones today, but the commitments of the week beat him, so to speak. He just had too much on. We had planned to talk this morning, but we weren't able to make that connection. And I'm sure he's been working furiously this week to get it right, because third week in a row for the Japanese team to come up against high-quality opposition. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, in a way, it's a bit like we were just talking about. He's now got to come up with something in a week with it's difficult. You're coming off a big loss to South Africa. You've got to come up with something. So he'll be, I don't know if he can do much selection-wise. I mean, he's probably got a couple of options, maybe some guys returning, but so then it's just down to tactics. I don't think we probably saw. We definitely didn't see everything they've got against South Africa. They didn't get much opportunity. So it's a matter of whether they can get that opportunity. I think Ireland's a formula team, so you'll have some specific, which work well against Australia. They had some very specific defensive tactics which did work and kept them in the game against Australia. Whether they can do that to Ireland, I'm not sure, but you'd like to think you'd think that Ireland at home is going to be, I don't think it's going to be 60 points, but I think they're going to be 30 points maybe if people play to their form and whatever. But don't write Japan off. They'll have more up their sleeve. Eddie puts a lot into his preparations. There's a lot of plays. They don't all feature. They're not all available for use in any specific game, but they're there in the background. They're already been practiced and whatever. So he'll have some specific tactics for this game. So hopefully he gets a chance to use them. It'll be a different sort of game. Ireland will be trying to impose themselves, but they're not the same as South Africa in their method. So it'll need the vigour that they showed in their defence against Australia. If they can get that, that'll cause a few headaches. Yeah.
Mm. When you say
tighter game.
When you say formula team, Ireland, what do you mean by that?
Well, they have some method in their play. So Eddie's mentioned that previously that there's sort of method. I don't want to go into the specifics of it, but there's sort of they do certain things in a certain part of the field, but they've got some X factor, and we've seen some. They got what I like is they got some change up tactics. We've seen that with their tap moves, where he jumped over the guy and everything else. That's not a try. You can't do that. But they'd thought about things so that one tap move sets up a bunch of options next time you use it, because everyone's seen that and they say, what's next? So I like how they have, when I say formula, they're like a bit like Eddie. They've got plays and moves and variations, and they get to them. A lot of teams do a lot of work on the training paddock, and it never features in the game. Why? You can't. If you scrum shit out, then you don't get to play any of the scrum plays. That's the reality of it. So you got to be able to get the ball out of the scrum, a stable scrum, and then you can play plays. So first phase plays when there's the least amount of people in front of you, you can put things on. Same at line-out time. So you've got to get the basics right, and you've got to be able to catch high balls and things like that. So all of that's in play. But I think it'll be they'll be running at each other, and that'll make for an interesting game.
Hopefully another entertaining match. The referee is Gianluca Necchi from Italy. I don't know much about him. Do you know much about him?
No. So that'll be interesting.
So there we go. So then the next of the big matches, the Wallabies against Italy in Udine in northern Italy. Again, we talk about scars, certainly from 3 years ago. The loss in a similar match in Florence, 28 points to 27, led ultimately to Dave Rennie losing his job as coach of the Australian team. The Italians look fresh, look ready, and look to have selected their best side. The Wallabies, 4 changes. Carter Gordon is in. Edmed is onto the bench. Jorgensen is out, but that looks like it's more to do with illness. Corey Toole is in. Fessler is starting ahead of Pollard. Valentini is on the bench. Hooper starts. And Ikitau not selected. I believe his wife is expecting a child, so unavailable for selection. And Paisami starts there. So Carter Gordon, it's a big selection. Where do you think?
Is it? I mean, he was starting from memory. He was starting when he disappeared, though. And to be honest, I think he played a couple of games in the competition in rugby league. So in my head, he's like a guy that's had a long layoff for injury. Like he's coming back. He hasn't actually played much of anything else. He's done a lot of training, no doubt about that. But he hasn't actually played a lot of games he didn't play a lot of games in rugby league. He played a couple. At the end of the season, he left, and then a couple this year. But that's it. So. I think he'll fall back into it pretty quickly in terms of being able to manage the game. I'm a bit of a fan of his. I'd like to. Ultimately, he's a sort of perfect 12 for me, but I think he'll he'll be relishing the opportunity there. So I'm really interested to see what difference that makes in terms of the phase attack. Calling whatever opportunities are, because we haven't seen a lot in that space. There hasn't been a lot going on at phase time for the back line. So I'm interested if he can call some shots on the run and maybe get some guys some opportunity and get a few guys into space. So that's a big challenge there for him personally. So it's really only he and Fessler that have coming into the side, based on, for whatever reason, rotation or whatever. Fessler's gone in, and you would have said maybe he's resting Pollard. Well, Pollard's still on the bench, so I don't know what that is. Maybe freshen him up a bit, I don't know. So there's a change there, but the rest of it looks, how they expect him to pick the side. I mean, you had to make a decision in the back row, so Valentini's on the bench. When you bring Hooper back, someone's got to drop out. So Valentini's dropped out. So he'll give good punch. So there's a bit of punch there coming off the bench with Pollard and Valentini. Samu's will be good value there as well. And Edmed's been, he's been solid pinch hitting in that role, and Danganau is another one. So they've got a bit to come into the game. Italy, as you say, I was impressed with Italy in the Six Nations, and they've had their best ever result. So you've got to say they're doing well. Gonzalo is the coach. He's a good operator. He's getting the best out of them. He understands he's an Argentinian, but he understands the Latin approach and can pull the right levers there to get them going. He went into that side on a short preparation, and he's made them competitive straight away. And they had a lot of close games, so they're far more competitive than people will remember. So I don't think Australia hasn't taken them for granted if you look at their selection. So I think I'm glad about that. I think it's more likely. It's more like what you'd expect in terms of personnel. So that gives Australia its best chance to do well. So you got to go out there. They're a big side. They're good. They can handle the ball. They've got a few bit of X factor too. So I think Australia's got to control possession there. You've got to try and frustrate them. They're playing in front of the home crowds, the same as the French. There's an expectation they're going to perform. So for me, I would be starving. Everyone wants us to run the ball, but I would be starving them of the ball, making them having to earn the ball, not giving them too much loose possession, not overplaying a game, and trying to frustrate them in the first 20 or 30 minutes and see if we can milk a few penalties and a few opportunities that way and just be a bit more methodical. That's just tactically how I'd probably look at the game. And there'll be some specific opportunities from set piece that they might try and expose individuals, but that's how I would if I was Australia. I think Italy they'll just have to man up in defence. I think Japan's given a good pointer about how you got to tackle as opposed to defending. I'm talking about tackling. You got to get stuck in, roll up the sleeves, and I think if they can do that with precision and discipline, they'll give themselves the best chance.
What about the management of the team, say the Wallabies this week? Because clearly off the back of the England loss, the team were disappointed. It was a big match. It was built up to be a big match, lots of expectations, particularly off the previous year, but really didn't fire a shot. When that happens and you're the coach of a team, how do you go about, rebuilding the confidence and the focus such that you don't have that happen twice in a row? And obviously there was the narrow win over Japan the week before the England loss as well.
Well, I think this is where Joe's a good operator. The coach has to instill some confidence in what's going on. So, after a game like that, you probably want to drop everyone, and then by the time you get to the next day, you've become a bit more rational yourself. So you got to lock yourself away and make sure that you're looking at the facts. It's always good to watch the game again. What you see live, what people talk about, is generally on one viewing of the game. So it's what they remember or where they're looking at the time in between having a beer or whatever it is. They have one view. You've actually got to go back and watch it. And I used to watch it on what they call the referee's cam, which is a much wider perspective, so you can see both teams. You can see where the space is on the field. You can hear the referee talking, so it's the referee's microphone. I'd watch it on that, and then you can hear what's going on, but you can see where the opportunities are, and you can be more instructive as a coach to your players about missed opportunity or opportunities taken well, and then you can turn that into a game plan possibly for the next game. You've got to think about the next game, but you can also talk about, well, why didn't we get this right? And you might be able to wash it down to 4 or 5 parts of the game when we made poor decisions or whatever. So without trying to finger someone specifically, you can wash it down to and make it seem, well, that's the way it is at the top end. A couple of things, and you get it right or wrong, and you're suddenly you're in and out of the game. So that's part of it, and then you've got to set up the next game. So in amongst all that, you've got to be thinking about your team selections. I'm sure before they went on the tour, they were thinking about, the Japan game being the opportunity to give guys a go, which is what they did. I would have taken the South African approach of playing your best team like they did against Japan, so you build into the French game. So you've given your guys a run, got the cobwebs out because they've had a layoff of a month, and sort of run into with predominantly the team playing their second game. Whereas Australia's went into England without their main team having a combination workout. So I think that's two different philosophical approaches. I would have done the South African way. Australia did it a different way, and so you went into England with trying to patch things up, and a lot of guys hadn't played for a month, so that mightn't have helped. So now they've got a bit of continuity this week. It's a chance to and this was the banana skin game for Rennie. Well, this could have been, depending on how they went. If they'd beaten England, they might have done something different with selections. Now they're forced to sort of keep going with predominantly their best team. And I think that's not a bad thing. Actually, I think it's, the tour is going to be over in a couple of weeks. You just get your best players out there and get them, keep them as a combination and give them time together to produce.
So we've discussed previously the rankings and the importance of the rankings, and I think both you and Eddie said, well, there's not too much you can do about it. You've just got to get on and win as many games as you possibly can. But it does add, particularly now as we get closer towards when those rankings are going to be material, as it relates to the selection the draw as it comes out for Rugby World Cup. Australia's, I think, 7 at the moment, and you really want to be in that top 6 so as that you're avoiding the other, too many of the good teams in the earlier pool rounds of a Rugby World Cup. Does it add a layer of expectation? Because if Australia does lose the match to Italy, it certainly starts to make that ranking task a whole lot harder than it would have been, otherwise.
I would bet that they've spent no time talking about that. No, that the media has and whatever. I would have bet that if they would have, in their heads, the coaches would have said, if we just get out there and concentrate on winning these games, we've got a few games that are going to be tough, but if we can make sure we knock these ones over, that'll put us in the best position. We can't control like New Zealand versus Scotland and things like if Scotland beats New Zealand, what does that mean? Yeah. Things like that. There are other results we can't control. So as a group, they would have spent no time. The coaches might have talked about it, but they should be doing everything they can just to prepare to win each game. You go. I never went on a tour going, I didn't want to win. I was happy to win 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 5 or 2 out of, that's sort of rubbish. You want to go there and win 5 out of 5, So that's just how you go.
Yeah.
It's just a question of who you're backing to do it and what you take into each week.
But I'm not suggesting that the team's sitting around talking about it, but it can become part of the context of a game, and because they mightn't be talking about it, but when they're talking to their cousin or their brother or their dad, who might say, "Oh, you're worried about the ranking," it's just a way of introducing another thought into it.
Might in the last round, it might make a difference because. There might be results, and we already know how other results have gone and whatever. And so, whether you're taking shots at goal or going for the sideline to score tries, because clearly margins matter in terms of the points on the rankings table. So maybe there'll be a case where you got to win by more than 20 or something like that. That might have but that'll be in the last round, I think, rather than now. So now's about trying to win. But I do think, if you were focused on that, you'd be trying to accumulate as many points as you can. So, I'm still asked the question about the conversion rate of kicking for touch on penalties versus kicking at goal. And I'm not wrong. I'm watching and I'm not seeing a lot of conversions of people going for touch these days. So, in fact, I'm seeing a lot of possession turned over. So, that's not a way to build scoreboard pressure. So, I think teams have got to be looking at that and saying, as much as it's not as exciting, maybe we should just take the 3 points, especially if you're dead in front.
Yeah. Wales, Argentina. Oh, sorry. Just Italy Wallabies. You've just give me a winner. Who did you think?
I think
Andrew Brace.
Yeah, I think Australia.
Australia.
Yeah, I think Australia. I think Australia. Australia by 12. Yeah.
Okay, very good. And the final of the big matches, or the tier 1 matches, Wales against Argentina. Wales having a awful time of it of late, and certainly having to deal with the chaos of a lot of uncertainty in terms of the domestic leagues, whether they going from 4 teams down to 3. And everything that goes with that, and lots of articles about just, what's wrong with Welsh rugby and can it ever be saved? And Argentina rolls into town, ready, willing and able. So your thoughts about that match?
Well, Argentina have benefited from, again, what we just talked about before. They've been putting themselves up against the so-called big boys, playing in the Southern Hemisphere, against the likes of New Zealand and South Africa frequently, and Australia, and and suddenly, guess what? They start having some wins. They've been able to beat New Zealand in New Zealand, and so all of that goes to confidence. It goes to their rankings. So they'll be going there as the favourites for sure, and they'll be wanting to make sure they don't lose out in terms of their position in world rugby. So they'll be quite determined. They've been pretty good, I think, this year. They've got a good game. I like their game. Wales, a new coach, and I think that's going to work for them. They were a really young team in the Six Nations, and now they've got a new coach. I think that that'll make a difference, because I think that I feel like that they were, it was a bit more of the same in recent times. Yeah, they were blooding new players, but as Eddie's made the point, you can blood new players and it becomes a crutch or an excuse or whatever. But those guys are starting to. Some of those guys showed their wares and showed that they're up to it, and they're now a bit further down the track in terms of experience. And if they stick with some of those guys maybe with a different coaching approach, that'll be freshen them up mentally. And if they stick with them, they'll accrue the experience between now and the World Cup to be competitive like they were in the last World Cup. So, not to be written off. They'll be looking at this as a big game to show people that they're back as a force. So it's a really good game for them to be able to show that they've improved.
So, give us a winner. Who do you think? Wales, Argentina.
No, I think when we've seen a lot more of Argentina there, and the same as South Africa. They've got some games under their belt. They've been very competitive, so I'm sticking with Argentina for the moment.
Okay.
But I think Wales won't make it easy. Yeah.
No, I think it will be another great contest to watch among the absolute smorgasbord of rugby that's being played in Europe. I'll just go through the games. Bristol Bears play against the Argentina 15 in Bristol. Georgia plays USA in Georgia. England A against the New Zealand 15 in Bath. Portugal plays Uruguay in Portugal. Colombia plays Mexico in Colombia. Spain against Australia A in Ireland A in Spain. Romania versus Canada in Romania. And then There are the World Cup qualifiers, which get underway in Dubai, where Samoa takes on Brazil and Belgium takes on Namibia for the final place in Rugby World Cup. And in the Rugby Europe Trophy, Poland takes on Denmark, Croatia takes on Czechia. And in the Rugby Europe Conference, Andorra takes on Israel and Slovakia takes on Austria. So that is the rugby that is taking place in Europe this week. And that makes no mention of the Champ Rugby, the Women's Premiership, both in the UK, the West Asian Super Rugby, France D2, the French Women's, the Scottish Women's and Men's, and the Spain men's and women's in competitions. And there is rugby being played in the Netherlands as well. So if you can't get to a game of rugby in Europe this weekend, you are not trying. But Ewen McKenzie, it does. When you sit back and look at this, the broad sweep of those wonderful matches that are being played at all sorts of different levels, men's and women's, largely across Europe, it does give a sense of the scale and the opportunity for future growth in the game of rugby.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive when you talk about it like that. We don't ever talk about it that way. So you've just rattled it off, and that's the peak. That's international competition, yes, where you got the peak. The best players of each country playing each other in somewhere. It's pretty impressive when you see and read that, and it's a pity we can't advertise that better and more often and whatever. I don't want to give the World Rugby an excuse, but there's obviously a lot to manage in that space in terms of the refereeing fraternity and everything else that goes with that when you're playing international competition. World Rugby's got its hands full, but not full enough not to release their strategic plan. But anyway, but they are busy. They are busy. So there's a bit going on. We just need to promote that as you faithfully say every week. It'd be nice to be able to put that up on some sort of a website or something to show people what's going on. Some sort of interesting website that allows you to track it.
Yeah.
You can go on the World Rugby site and you can see games, and it just sort of comes up as a sort of ongoing calendar list, but it's pretty unexciting. You can't get the nitty gritty of those games. So it's crying out for somewhere to be able to centralise what's going on, and so you can get familiar with the players and where they're playing. The fact that those games are playing in Colorado with the Pacific, that was interesting to me, that the different places in the world that the game's actually happening, what venues they're playing at. Soldier Field, we saw that last week. So there's plenty to advertise and promote. We just got to find more people to do it. Other than us.
Yeah, well, indeed. But to me, it's very exciting, and we've been saying it since we've started the program here at Rugby Unity. Clearly, our mission is to help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world, which is why it's important for us to talk about all of the games across the world. But I think to just shine a light, that to me, when I put that together this morning and had a look at it, I sort of sat back and thought, well, there you go. Yes, we've got a lot of work to do. Yes, we can do better in a whole lot of things, but there's a lot of great things that are going on this weekend across the world of rugby. And I do hope everyone who's attending those matches enjoys them. And I'm sure there will be some great rugby played. Now, Ewen McKenzie, the questions and comments this week have just been overwhelmingly about Matey, who absolutely stole the show last week. People claiming, Peter Clarkson 9161 on YouTube claiming that Ewen McKenzie's parrot is a Springboks supporter. People saying
I've got its partners actually red and blue. So like I've got if you put the female version, it's actually red and blue. So yeah, ironically the males and females are different colours. So yeah, but you're right, Springboks. Yeah.
So in terms of that though, another on Reddit, someone asked the question, I wonder how many other animals Ewen McKenzie has and what are their names. He would like to know the names of your other animals, because obviously Matey is one parrot and we've got the three geese, Mark, Gary and Glenn Ella. But how many animals do you have down there in your menagerie?
Unfortunately, 3 ducks they are, and unfortunately one of them, we had to euthanise one last week, so that was very sad. So we're down to 10 to 2. Okay. So old age got the better.
Oh.
The expression lame duck is actually a true expression. So they do go lame. So,
but how many other animals do you have down there?
Well, we're on a farm, so we've got a.
But how many of your pets? So how many birds do you have?
I've got a few Indian ringneck parrots and a few galahs and I've got a bunch of them. They're all rescues, rescue animals and whatever. So you find one, you get it a partner, and then when you're at the pet shop, you see another one struggling, so you end up with that. You find a partner for that, and suddenly you got, 8 or 9 in sort of some sort of care. So it fills in their hours. They're all got personalities and they're all interesting, all different colours, and so different names, obviously. So
do you name them all? They all get names.
They've all got names. Yeah. Yeah.
Give us another couple of names.
Classic names. Oh, there's there's Barry, there's Daisy, there's Bella, there's Gigi, there's Momo, there's a whole bunch. There's Bernard's there, Penny, Rosie. So it goes on. So
and so
with birds, bird life, they all need partners, So you don't have one, you got to have 2.
Right.
So you got to work in sort of even numbers. So if you've got 3, you need to have a 4th. You've got to have a partner for each one because that's just how they function in life.
Okay.
If you look out the window and you see a magpie, there's always 2. Or if you see a raven beside the road, there's always 2. They're always in pairs. That's how they function. So that's how they function best.
Yeah. Do you like life on the farm?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's very, very peaceful. So it's a very good contrast between aeroplane noise and Sydney. So
yeah, very true. Yeah. And just in terms of those rescues, are they rescued with a reason to return them at some point in time, or you've rescued them to keep them with you?
Not, well, some of them, most of them are tropical birds, so they're not natives, and they're generally been abandoned by someone. A lot of people, they find them too noisy, or they're moving overseas or something. That's the excuse, but in the end, they take a bit of work, and so some can't fly, some are missing claws or whatever. So some don't have feathers because they've been pluckers or whatever. So they need a bit of help, and so you can give them a better life. It's they're quite rewarding. Some talk. Quite a few of them talk, so you can have conversations with them. So it's all. They enjoy your company. They like routine. So it's all very interesting.
Very good. Well, Miguel Gomez said the parrot made the best points, and Sticksman 500. That bird wants a starring role, and I think it did give. The personality of Matey looks like certainly very forward and very confident.
Well, if I can coax him, I'll get him to come on, and he can do. He's really good at bird impressions, so he can mimic a magpie, he can mimic a duck, he can mimic a cockatoo, he can mimic the smoke alarm, he can mimic a fire alarm. So he's pretty good.
So if you say smoke alarm,
no, he's not. No, he's not on demand. He's not just when he feels like doing it. So
okay.
That's the problem.
All right.
I can't control it, but he can do it.
All right.
I've heard him do the lot. He's got a good repertoire.
All right. Well, listen, that will be for a future episode. But for now, we need to let you get back to your animals. I need to get back to work, and the audience needs to get back to what they do best, which is enjoy this great game of rugby. And what a fabulous weekend we do have ahead of us. So people, please remember your voice is crucial in shaping the future of rugby and indeed contributing to rugby unity. So please, the questions and the comments, keep them coming. Don't forget to subscribe on your favourite pod catcher. And as always, please leave us a rating or a review. It does help us to be found, and it's great to see the audience coming back in such big numbers over the last couple of weeks, which is great. So please make sure also to follow our socials on Instagram and TikTok, and the links are in the show notes. And also, you can subscribe to our Substack for exclusive content, blogs, behind the scenes, insights, tour guides from earlier in the season, and full podcast access. The link will be in the show notes for this episode, and it is ad-free, and you can access via the QR code on the screen. So, please, everyone, enjoy the weekend, but most importantly, please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.